Is a crisis coming to the Korean Peninsula in 2026? Korea is one of a number of major flashpoints in a global conflict that pits the US and its mostly Western allies against an alliance of states seeking to upend the current global order led by China and Russia. And North Korea is part of that alliance. In October this year, some 10,000 North Korean troops joined Russia's war against Ukraine, highlighting the fact that this is indeed a global conflict with global implications. But it's also put focus on the Korean Peninsula, where tensions are rising once again. But when might things really kick off? Well, astrology is pointing to 2026 as a highly significant year for North and South Korea. It looks like a time of crisis for the Korean Peninsula. Could it mean war? Well, that's the question we're going to explore in this video. So welcome to another journey into the past to understand the present and the future. In my November forecast, I said I thought the Koreas would be in the news this month. The sign of Leo is associated with North and South Korea, so that's a part of the world we might hear more about over the course of the retrograde. It's everything all at once right now, unfortunately. In November, North Korea sent troops to Russia to fight against Ukraine, leading to a big escalation in that conflict. And this past week, the South Korean president, Yoon Suk-yeol, made a failed attempt to declare martial law, shocking the country and its allies and plunging it into a political crisis. The astrological explanation for this is that the Koreas resonate to the sign of Leo, and activations of that sign signal big change for them. And guess where Mars, planet of conflict, is stationing retrograde and pumping all its fiery energy? Yep, the sign of Leo. We'll come back to this theme later in this video. I probably should tell you that in the bonus section of my December forecast, which is available for members of World Astrology Report on the video page of my site, worldastrologyreport.com, I demonstrated another technique that showed clearly that the Koreas were in the firing line for this Mars retrograde. So do give that a watch if you want to understand how I'm doing this stuff. Also, I'm currently taking bookings for natal consultations, which you can book through the same site. Members of World Astrology Report get 20% off my usual fees. And finally, on December the 21st, I'll be putting out my forecast for 2025 in the next World Astrology Report members live stream. You don't have to be a member to join the stream, and you can purchase entry on the live streams page of worldastrologyreport.com. But entry to these streams is free for members, so you might want to consider signing up. And I'm raising subscription prices in January, so now is the time to get in and lock in the current rates. Thanks for listening. Let's get on with the video. I'm going to quote from an article published in October 2023 that should give a flavor of the seriousness of the current situation. The article by Robert A. Manning is called "The Risk of Another Korean War is Higher Than Ever." Quote, "This past January, Robert Carlin and Siegfried Hecker, both experienced Korea watchers, caught many by surprise when they wrote that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is preparing for war. That may be an exaggeration, but the concern is not misplaced. I have worked on the Korea nuclear problem in and out of government over the past 3 decades, and the Korean Peninsula seems more dangerous and volatile than any time since 1950. Since that article was published, 10,000 North Korean troops have joined Russia's war against Ukraine. To me, this points to the unfortunate reality that a global conflict is currently underway, with eastern Ukraine as one of its fronts. And it also highlights the risk of further escalation in this global war. But the deployment of North Koreans to Ukraine also points a finger in the direction of another of this global conflict's possible flashpoints, the Korean Peninsula. What's more, the formation of the alliance between Russia and North Korea seems to be resonating with the 2-year synodic cycle of Mars and Pluto. These two planets conjoined in February, when the themes of their cycle would have been established. At this time, we start to see news stories about a growing alliance between Russia and North Korea. For example, on February the 13th, with Mars and Pluto almost exactly conjunct, this story came out saying that US officials were worried about warming relations between North Korea and Russia. On February the 20th, it was reported that Vladimir Putin had gifted North Korean leader Kim Jong-un a car as recognition of their, quote, special personal relations. Then, in June, Mars and Pluto reached their first hard aspect of the cycle, their waxing square. At this time, it was reported that the two countries had signed a mutual defense pact, agreeing to come to each other's assistance if attacked. North Korea is also supplying Russia with weapons, while Russia is providing much needed food and money to North Korea. And in late October and early November, Mars and Pluto made the first of 3 oppositions that they'll make. And we've seen North Korean troops actually deployed to Russia to fight against Ukraine. But there's another reason I think we've seen this development right now, and it has to do with the zodiac sign of Leo. In my November forecast episode, I suggested that North Korea would be in the news this month. My reasoning for that had to do with Mars, the war planet. Mars is currently slowing down and getting ready to station retrograde in the sign of Leo. Leo has to do with royalty and centrality, but just like people, different countries tend to resonate to different zodiac signs. They won't necessarily resonate to a single sign, of course, but again, just like people, there will be parts of the zodiac they're more sensitive to than others. And both North and South Korea seem to resonate heavily with the sign of Leo. One of the ways we can associate parts of the world with zodiac signs is using what's called the geodetic map. This is what it looks like. It divides the entire planet into 12 30-degree strips of longitude. We assign 0 degrees of Aries to the prime meridian, which runs through Greenwich in London. The first 30 degrees of longitude become associated with Aries. The second 30-degree strip is assigned to the sign of Taurus, then Gemini, then Cancer, and so forth. The sign associated with the Korean peninsula using this technique is Leo. We have Mars, the god of war, stationing retrograde in Leo right now, and suddenly North Korean troops are at war alongside Russia in Ukraine. Incidentally, it seems pretty weird that this technique actually works, because the fact that the prime meridian of 0 degrees longitude passes through London is arbitrary. It was decided that way as a result of Britain's global influence back in the 19th century when this system was formalized. It seems odd that the gods would care about this very human way of dividing up the earth, and yet it works. And in this video, we'll see how that's true, because when we look at the natal charts of North and South Korea, we see yet more confirmation that these countries resonate to the sign of Leo. There's a bit of a problem with the charts I'm using for North and South Korea. I get most of my mundane charts from this excellent book by Nicholas Campion, The Book of World Horoscopes. To draw up a natal chart for a country, we need to know the exact moment it came into existence, just as we have to know the exact time a person was born to create a chart for them. There are many different ways a country can be born. Sometimes a significant declaration is made by a leader. Sometimes a law comes into force. It really depends on the country, and deciding when a country is born can be something of a messy process. Campion has done the work of cataloguing the birth moments of every country in the world in this book. Sometimes a country has multiple charts because it's not clear which chart is the valid one. And of course, more than one chart will often apply to the same place. But sometimes we just don't have good records of what was happening when a country was born, so the time of birth isn't clear. And that's the case for the charts of both North and South Korea. The chart for South Korea is set for the 15th of August, 1948, when Syngman Rhee became its first president. But we don't have a time for when this happened. This means we don't know where the powerful angles of the chart are, and also the fast-moving moon could be out by a few degrees. In the case of North Korea, we aren't even sure of its exact date of birth. Campion gives the date of September the 10th, 1948, when he says the country was given independence following 3 years of Soviet occupation and a republic was proclaimed. But he says that sometimes the dates of the 9th and the 12th of September are also given for independence. And again, we don't know the time. So once again, we don't know the important angles for this chart, and the moon placement is also unknown. Without rectifying these charts, which I haven't done, there's a lot of uncertainty about the astrology of these countries. Keep that in mind. With that said, there are still things we can say about these charts. And one of them is that we can clearly see an emphasis on the fixed signs in these charts, and particularly the sign of Leo. Both the charts for South and North Korea have stelliums. That's a group of 3 planets or more in Leo. So these charts are echoing what the geodetic map says. They're closely associating Leo with Korea. This means that when the sign of Leo is stimulated by planets, we're likely to see significant events in the North Korean peninsula. We can also see that the lunar nodes of these charts are at 6 and 8 Taurus and Scorpio. These are very sensitive points in any chart. On December the 6th, Mars will station retrograde at 6 Leo, which is square to the lunar nodes in the North Korean chart. This is also a sensitive point, and I think this is another reason why we're seeing North Korea in the news now. But we should also bear in mind that Pluto is about to transition into Aquarius for 20 years. That suggests the potential for profound change in the Koreas over that time. Both North and South Korea were born with Pluto in Leo, so they'll soon be reaching their Pluto oppositions, which will likely signify an important turning point in the question of who holds power and how in these countries. But if we want to know when really significant change is coming to the careers, we'll need to look for eclipses stimulating these charts. We can come up with a provisional theory that eclipses in the Leo-Aquarius axis will mark big change in the political life of these countries. But can we find evidence this is true? Well, the most significant event that affected the careers in the 20th century was the Korean War, which lasted from June the 25th, 1950 until July the 27th, 1953, when the Korean armistice was signed. Here's a list of eclipses during this time, and you can see that for most of it, they were indeed taking place in Leo and Aquarius. But actually, the war started a little before the eclipses moved into the Leo-Aquarius axis. The first of them came on August the 17th, 1951, with a lunar eclipse at 23 degrees of Aquarius. If you as an astrologer were waiting for eclipses to move into Leo-Aquarius to time the outbreak of war in Korea, you'd have been late. But if we look again at the list of eclipses, we might want to take into account this one at 18 degrees of Virgo on the 12th of September 1950. Why was this eclipse significant? Well, it took place just a degree from the sun in the North Korea chart, which is at around 17 degrees of Virgo. We don't know the exact position of this sun, it may be a degree or two out, but regardless, this eclipse would have been close enough to trigger this chart and trigger big change in the entity it describes. An eclipse within a couple of degrees of a chart sun is always going to trigger major change in that entity, meaning great beginnings and endings. And this was a nasty eclipse. It was conjunct Saturn with a close and violent Mars-Pluto square in the chart. I think this eclipse signified that North Korea would go to war. Solar eclipses come into effect up to about 3 months in advance. The outbreak of the Korean War on June the 25th, 1950 came within that 3-month window, about 2.5 months before this solar eclipse. The last time eclipses were taking place in Leo Aquarius was between February 2017 and January 2019. There were some serious attempts at reconciliation between the two countries at this time. In April 2018, Kim Jong-un became the first North Korean leader to enter the South when he met South Korean President Moon Jae-in for talks. They agreed to work towards reducing nuclear arms. The same year came Donald Trump's historic meeting with Kim Jong-un in Singapore, but Trump's efforts to reconcile with North Korea ultimately failed to bring a breakthrough after North Korea refused to commit to nuclear disarmament in exchange for the lifting of sanctions. And it's interesting that Trump is now coming back. So when are eclipses suggesting significant change for North and South Korea once again? Well, very soon. The first eclipse in the Leo-Aquarius series will come on February the 17th, 2026 at 28 degrees of Aquarius. This is the same degree as Saturn in the North Korean chart and pretty close to Saturn and Mercury in the South Korean chart. In August of 26, we'll see an eclipse at 20 Leo, very close to the sun in the South Korea chart. I think these eclipses are likely signifying significant change in relations between North and South Korea in 2026. What kind of change? Eclipses are quite difficult to predict the effects of, but we can usually get an idea by looking at other chart factors, such as transiting planets. And it looks to me like there's the potential for an escalation in conflict between the two countries around this time. This comes in part down to the Mars placement of the North Korean chart. If we look at where Pluto will be in the first half of 2026, we can see that it'll be forming a square with Mars. Mars-Pluto is a violent combination of planets. And we have confirmation from the past that stimulation of this Mars placement has effects on North Korea. In 1996, Uranus, which can have a disruptive and dangerous effect when in combination with Mars, was also squaring Mars from Aquarius. And relations got very tense between North and South Korea at this time. In April 96, hundreds of North Korean troops invaded the demilitarized zone between the two countries in violation of the Korean Armistice Agreement. Later the same year, North Korean commandos infiltrated South Korea by submarine as part of a plot to assassinate that country's president. This led to a 49-day manhunt for the agents, who were all captured or killed except for one who made it home. So I have to say, I don't particularly like the indications for North and South Korea in 2026. It looks like a dangerous and volatile period of time. Astrology allows us to see the shadow of events, but generally not the precise details of how things will play out. And I think it's there that we have the chance to change outcomes. So we don't have to expect the worst here. Often it takes a crisis of some kind to bring a difficult and tense situation to an end. Perhaps we'll see a situation of tension or even a contained outbreak of violence that leads to demands for change and maybe ultimately brings peace. That's it for this video. Thanks, and see you next time.